Hi, everybody. It's your teacher, Meg. I just wanted to check in this week with some thoughts about the discussions from last week. And I like to bring up a few points here and there about discussions. If I've selected a discussion to include, it doesn't mean it's any better or worse than any of the others. It just means I noticed a little something, maybe the way it was worded, maybe just one point that either helps us move the discussion forward a little bit more, or just brings up a point that I wanted to really make, or just has to do with something interesting. I think that an interesting direction that the conversation went. So, just a few of the things that came up in discussion. The first discussion I wanted to discuss was the what can you tell me about a work of art? So, this is a discussion I really enjoy because it's all based on your initial observations, right? And those initial observations you might think are just kind of random, but they're actually pointing out a lot of things that we're going to talk about over the course of this semester. So you've already identified them, right? You're already showing that you're good at noticing the details. So we have the choice between an image A or image B on this one. And the first one was Van Gogh's Starry Night. So what I loved about this post by Camille was her way of describing what you see here in highlighted, the almost dotted brushstrokes. So that was a really wonderful just choice of words because it's not the kind of vocabulary that we might learn in the class. It's not what maybe an art critic might use to describe the Van Gogh, but you don't need those kind of words. All you need is words that work for you as a descriptor. So what Camille did here was really articulate what she saw and then find a word that worked. So just a dotted brushstroke is a really perfect way to describe what's going on in the Van Gogh. So I loved all the posts that had those kinds of descriptions where you just, even though they weren't maybe art words, they were words that gave somebody else a really good impression of what you were seeing. Um, I forgot to capture whose ever name this was, but this student noticed that there was a church building in the painting, maybe to show how Van Gogh was religious to an extent. So that's a wonderful way of identifying a part of the scene and then drawing a conclusion based on that. And so this has to do with something we call content, which we're going to be talking about. And it has to do with that kind of guessing that you're doing in discussion number 3, where when you see a detail, you can assume that there's like more meaning attached to it, right? And so connecting the church to religion was really an important leap to make. And there's a lot of interesting history about Van Gogh and his religion and how he tried to become a priest, a leader in his religious order, and wasn't able to. So the more you learn about that, the more you see how that connection is really quite real. So good job noticing little details that you can attach more meaning to. And Shania pointed out this wonderful personal connection about even as a child, the moon and stars are something I always look forward to seeing at night. And this is what artists tend to do. They tend to find little pieces of experience that we can all relate to, right? So Van Gogh has a story to tell, a message to send with his painting, but he's doing it through imagery that we can all relate to. So he's finding this kind of universal thing between everybody, and it creates a connection point, and that's something that artists are really good at. So good observation, Shania. And here, Andrea pointed out, oh, this is about the next image, image B, which was by Artemisia Gentileschi. And she said that the women are typically, from that era, would have typically been known to be in a fragile kind of role, and that it was extraordinary to have women exhibiting this strong kind of behavior that we see in that image. And that's a really, really great observation that it is out of the ordinary. It is very unusual for women to be represented in such a position of strength. And that has a lot to do with what we call context, the circumstances surrounding the creation of the work of art. And in this case, Artemisia Gentileschi had a very interesting story, right? So that really informed the way she depicted women. So first of all, she's a woman artist, and there weren't very many of those. And second of all, she went through a particular experience, as you'll read about, that gave her this way of framing women as very powerful. And this was a really great observation. Again, I didn't catch the name, sorry here, but that this student noticed that the painting looks more like a photograph than the actual painting. So that is a very good observation, especially when compared to the Van Gogh, right? And when we get to the end of the semester, we're going to learn about the tools that artists used. And there were actually proto-photographic tools that created projections that a lot of artists from this time period relied on in order to get that very, very realistic three-dimensional look to their paintings. And if you get to the end of the semester and you want to do the extra credit assignment called Secret Knowledge, it goes into depth about how artists were using these kinds of tools. It's really, really fascinating. And then this Jasmine here noticed that the painting seemed to be about a story, right? So all the little components of details that she looked at wove together a story for her. So a lot of you did that, kind of checking out a little details to turn it into a larger narrative and story about a woman who killed someone, as having her friend or maid help her dispose of the head. So really good way of connecting the scene to a larger narrative that's going on. And as you'll read, it's a very intricate and intense kind of narrative. What I loved about Sarah's observation is the thought that the author intended there to be a sense of secrecy and shame. And that's a really great observation because, again, the artist is trying to connect with something that we all have felt from time to time, keeping a secret or a sense of shame about something, right? So the artist uses things like body language and, tension and the deep, deep shadows and the darkness and the light kind of playing off of each other to really set this scene of emotional intensity. And we got that sense of secrecy and shame, like Sarah did. And then in the other conversation, comparing Naram-Sin to Darius and Xerxes, there was a really interesting observation by Charlotte. And it's a really, really simple observation, but sometimes you can get a lot out of the really obvious and really basic things. So Charlotte pointed out that the Naram-Sin is a vertical format and the Darius is a horizontal format. And you might think, well, what does that have to do with the content? It's not part of the details, it's not part of the story, but it definitely has to do with kind of our expectations of how things are presented to us visually. And very often anything that's in a vertical format like that has a sense of being very much like a proclamation. It's sometimes called a power format because it's very kind of in your face, and it has a sense of something being presented to you, whereas a horizontal format has more of like a narrative sense to it, right? So think about how you read things from left to right, or interestingly, this is from a Persian culture, which you would have read from right to left. But anyway, when something's laid out for us and that it feels like a timeline or a series of things that are being told. So it has more of this narrative quality rather than the sense of like proclamation. So even though that's a really, really simple, small detail, Charlotte picked up on it. And I think it made it an interesting point that sometimes, artists play on us in a lot of different ways in order to create the message that they want. And even something as simple as horizontal vertical formats can be really powerful. So thanks for all the great observations this week. And I look forward to everything from this week's discussions. And as always, if you have any questions, reach out and contact me, and I'll see you online. Thanks. Bye.